We are going to get started. I want to first thank everyone for joining us today for our latest Max Minutes. Today we're going to be joined by Jacque Joyce and Breezy Straton to talk about how employers are engaging or supporting or working with workforce providers and how they are responding to what's happening, our current situations happening with COVID-19 and other things that are going on. So we have a great presentation today from Jacque and Breezy, and we are going to get started. Just for housekeeping purposes, this call is being recorded. If you have any concerns or objections to being recorded, please let us know in the chat box, and that is how we will know if anyone has any objections. So I'll give folks about 30 seconds if you have any objections, and then we'll get started. Okay, seeing none, we're going to continue. First, I want to thank all of our anchor supporters for MAX. As you see on the screen, we are supported by some very great organizations. So we want to thank all of our anchor supporters and our sponsors. Thank you for being part of MAX. Thank you for supporting this call today and for all that you do for MAX. My name is Dana Inman. I am President and CEO of Atlanta Center for Self-Sufficiency. I also chair the MAX Provider Council. And we are going to be joined today, as I said, by Jacque and Breezy, and I'll let them both introduce themselves. We are going to start with Jacque.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Let me pull up my presentation real quick. And as Dana said, I'm Jacque Joyce, and I work for Atlanta Career Rise, and I work specifically on our project called Metro Atlanta Industry Partnerships. And so we're a collaboration of Atlanta Career Rise and WorkSource Metro Atlanta, and we serve the 10-county region that the WorkSource boards serve. So Atlanta Career Rise is a funder collaborative, and we bring together local funders to help build a strategic vision for a 13-county region. And WorkSource Metro Atlanta is a collaboration of the 5 WorkSource boards that serve the 10-county Metro Atlanta region. And so at MAIP, what we do is we focus on understanding and responding to workforce needs from employers and connect them with our workforce partner network to implement regional job programs that meet the needs of our employers and our job seekers. We really have 2 customers that we work with. We work with our employer partners and understanding what their needs are, but we also work with our workforce partners to make sure our job seekers are getting the support that they need in connecting those 2 pipelines. So I have a roadmap here for you to look at just in case you haven't heard of us before. Our work really fits kind of into 5 buckets. We work with hiring and candidate sourcing that's really focused on how do we connect job seekers immediately with employers or employers immediately with job seekers. Training and registered apprenticeships, it really focuses on how can we help job seekers gain the skills that employers are needing. Employee success supports and quality careers and workplaces focus on how do we decrease retention, either by helping job seekers be more prepared to enter and stay in the workforce and have employment success, or working with employers to make sure that there's career pathways and quality opportunities for job seekers. And our last bucket of work is really around career awareness and promotion, and that focuses on our K-12 system and making sure that that pipeline is also connected to our workforce system. So I'm here to kind of tell you guys about what have employers been telling us and what have we been learning over this time with the pandemic and COVID-19. And so the first thing that we've really been hearing is that healthcare, IT, and supply chain are posting the majority of the jobs right now. And as things continue to reopen, we'll see which other industries and businesses decide to start looking at their hiring. For the healthcare perspective, we know that like acute care and like CNAs are still hiring right now, but we also know that a lot of elective surgeries and things that are really what the money makers are for the healthcare industry have significantly slowed down or been put on hold. So while healthcare is doing a lot of hiring still, the pandemic is definitely impacting that industry. Information technology is kind of a mixed bag, right? So we know that a lot of our technology companies provide technology solutions. And since everybody has gone to this virtual model, or a lot of people have gone to this virtual model, those companies have been doing really well, but some other technology companies have not been doing very well. So if they maybe served the retail industry, or if those companies kind of served an industry that is really struggling right now, then that business is definitely going to be impacted. In supply chain, as we've all heard, so many people are really purchasing online, and so supply chain has seen a huge uptick. They're purchasing online, getting things delivered, so that has definitely seen an uptick, but a lot of it is kind of in that delivery space. Another thing that we've heard is that employers are struggling financially, right? So like I mentioned earlier, each industry is really a mixed bag with unique factors that are impacting them. So because everybody's a little bit unique, it really is a mix between each industry. We've also heard from employers and from our workforce partners that returning to work safely is a big concern for job seekers. Right now, we've heard that almost all companies now are in the business of public health. And how do job seekers return safely to work? How do businesses put the right practices in place to make sure that their employees are safe? That's definitely at the top of mind for job seekers, workforce partners, and our employer partners. Because of this, the question of how do job seekers return safely, a lot of employers kind of pause their hiring efforts because all of the recommendations were changing so rapidly. We heard from many employers that they wanted to pause their hiring and be able to support the employees that they currently have until they've figured out what all of the different requirements were going to be. And once that really shaped up, then they would begin looking at hiring again. Another thing that we heard were that organizations are likely to accelerate their transition to sourcing and hiring candidates virtually. So that really means virtual fairs, right? Or instead of bringing somebody in to do their interview in person, instead what they would do is a phone call first and then a video interview instead of any of that face-to-face interaction. We know that a lot of organizations were already starting to move that way, but because of this pandemic, a lot of companies have really accelerated how they wanted to implement that model. And so job seekers need to be ready for this. So that's definitely one way that the Workforce Network can help is preparing job seekers for completing online applications, making sure that their resumes are solid and can get through those algorithms. And also virtual interviewing is something that a lot of job seekers haven't done before and is incredibly nerve-wracking. I've done it before. Another thing that we've heard from employers are that they're increasing virtual work and making adjustments to their staffing models. So as we've been talking with employers, so many that are able have gone to fully virtual work or some kind of hybrid of virtual work. And so career seekers and job seekers need to be prepared for how to work remote. It's definitely a different environment. You have to have much stronger communication with your team. There's not that water cooler effect that you get when you're inside your organization. So being able to have those conversations with job seekers are really important. One of the last things we've heard from employers is that they really ramped up their EAP services to make sure that their employees have their basic needs met. As we know, a lot of the asks from job seekers from people who've been laid off and who are no longer out of work or who are no longer in work, they have a lot of critical basic needs. And so employers have been ramping up that service to make sure that their employees as well have those basic needs met. So how can workforce partners like yourselves help? Like I mentioned before, help those job seekers prepare for virtual job searching. We expect that virtual fair model to stay a viable model for the foreseeable future. There really isn't an end in sight right now for the pandemic. We're hoping things are starting to kind of slow down, but we anticipate this virtual fair model to be something that's here to stay for a little while. And we know that a lot of employers and workforce partners are investing in it. So even as the pandemic slows down, we think it's something that's going to continue to be a viable option. Help prepare those job seekers for work virtually. Many employers have a plan to provide robust virtual work options. So we want to make sure that job seekers that are able to work from home or obtain jobs that help them work from home, that they're ready to do that. They have the skills to do that. You can help by advocating for addressing longstanding virtual divide issues. So one of the things that we've talked with our workforce partners and our employers a lot is about this idea of the digital divide and how a lot of job seekers don't even have access to a digital device, or they don't have Wi-Fi, or they have limited phone plans with limited data access. And we know that as the economy changes, the people who are already struggling continue to struggle more. So helping by addressing those issues and helping find solutions are really important. And then be prepared to help an influx of job seekers after July. Some of the things that we've heard from our workforce partners is that many public support, specifically UI, had increased, the support had increased, and that is set to expire at the end of July. So a lot of job seekers, from what we've heard, while the employers had furloughed them or laid them off, as they're beginning to reopen, job seekers are choosing to stay on unemployment because they're making more on unemployment. So once that benefit ends, we expect to see an influx of job seekers at the end of July. So definitely be prepared for that. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention really quickly is kind of how one of the ways that Metro Atlanta Industry Partnerships is wanting to help our employers and help our job seekers during this time. So we've put together a program called Supportive Hiring and Employment Program, and it's called SHEP. And really it's a virtual event to be able to connect job seekers and employers together. So the job seekers to resources that help them overcome their barriers, but also be able to connect them with employers and help employers fill those gaps as they're looking to hire again. So I just wanted to let you all know that this is something that we're doing, and the purpose of this is really to be a collaborative effort with our network, so that our job seekers are able to access all of those resources, but also meet the needs of our employer partners, because we know that as the economy changes, employers are going to, or job seekers are going to need to have more support as they re-enter the workforce. So here's some ways that you can get involved with us. We do have bi-weekly webinars, which will go to monthly at the end of June. And we put out a digest at the end of each of our webinars to kind of tell you about what happened and give you some resources. We also have roadmaps and learning communities, and then we also have a LinkedIn group that you can join to get updates about what we're doing. We push out lots of resources, hiring events, and my email is at the bottom if you have questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Breezy.
Good morning, everyone. So let me go ahead and get my presentation up for you. Awesome. So here we go. So my name is Breezy Straton. I serve as Deputy Director of the Douglas County Economic Development Authority. And the key parts of that role is that I serve our community as the single point of contact for workforce development efforts, but also assisting our existing industries with anything they may need. Traditionally has been workforce development, but sometimes it's about infrastructure, public safety, and just resources and contacts. So with that, COVID-19 created a unexpected challenge, I think, for all of us, but especially our employers. So at the beginning, that first week that we were home, that March 16th week, I started reaching out to employers within Douglas County and kind of putting them into buckets to see, you know, as patients are triaged when they have an emergency or a crisis, I was essentially triaging our employers. And so the three buckets I created were minimal impact, moderate impact, and then severe impact. Believe it or not, we had a lot of our large employers were in that minimal impact bucket. They didn't have disruption. The way that they order their supplies and such did not cause a delay in supply chain, and they were able to do what they needed to do and not lay off anyone. Sales and operations did not decrease, and they did not have any decrease in staffing level, meaning that they maintained any kind of temporary employee they may have, and did nothing with their permanent employees. The second bucket was the moderate impact, and I will say this is where the majority of our employers fell into. There was some kind of supply chain disruption. They did have a decrease in sales of some sort, and then most of them stopped with their temporary employees, but did not do any decrease with their permanent employee. And when talking with them about the stopping of the temporary employee, it was because of safety issues. They just wanted to maintain some level of safety in the craziness that COVID was those first couple of weeks, and kind of get a handle on it. Additionally, they wanted to kind of fill it out to see if there was going to be more disruption than what they were already experiencing. And so that caused them to do that. We had several of our larger employers have what I will call severe impact. We have had one closure, complete closure. We have another company that has sent everyone home and they're not operating and has laid off 60% of their workforce. And that employer actually is a multi-county employer. They have locations in Cobb and Douglas. And then, and it's basically because of their operations it's an exhibit house, and they have, it's for large gatherings. And since no one can have a large gathering, there's no need for an exhibit house at the moment. But the thing that ran through all of them, whether it was a minimal impact, moderate impact, or severe impact, that every employer cited lack of childcare as a significant concern. So a lot of what we were doing was providing resources for them in order to handle those specific needs. So that goes to how we decided to do this. So the one thing every employer asked for was, who can I call just to find out information? So through our partnership already, since I already serve as the single point of contact for workforce development, we decided that I would become the single point of contact for employers. We partnered with our Chamber of Commerce. They took on the role of helping small businesses and navigating the SBA funding that was coming out. We took on the role of workforce development, understanding partial claims through the Department of Labor, understanding all of those things that came through the workforce pipeline. And that's kind of how we divided and conquered this situation in our community. But the employers really liked having the one person they could contact. And my role was, if I didn't have an answer, was to find the answer and get back to them, understanding that this was a crisis situation and that time was of the essence. We also wanted to provide continuous updates, but not inundate them. So we just created a weekly kind of email that we sent out with any kind of new updates that came out, whether it was from the governor or from the Department of Labor or from SBA. We also put any kind of workshops or webinars that we were made aware of from our various partners in that, so that employers could hear it for themselves, knowing that I would pass along any pertinent information to them. Some employers had specific questions. We have an alpaca farm in Douglas County. It's one of our tourism attractions. and they receive a lot of produce from pantries and food banks that don't get used up by humans. And because of the increased need of people who are food insecure, they no longer had those extra carrots and such to donate to the alpaca farm. And they were worried about having to lay employees off so they could provide food for the alpacas. Now, that's a very strange situation, and I never in my life thought that I would be helping find carrots. But luckily, we have several farms in Douglas County, and we reached out and we started getting food delivered to the alpaca farm, simply so they wouldn't have to lay off the 3 employees they had, because they needed to move funding over to keeping the animals alive. Now, I know that's a crazy and very specific situation, but those are the specific concerns that we started addressing. We also developed a reopening guide in partnership with our chamber. That consisted of a lot of things. Obviously, the recommendations passed down from the governor's office through his executive orders, but also looking at resources from other places and helping to secure PPE for our employers. We are fortunate that we have a medical supply manufacturer in our community, and they were able to assist us in securing PPE for our other employees, including the Douglas County Fire Department, who had issues getting PPE. So with that, like Jackie said, a lot of our employers, their chief concern was, how do I keep my employees safe? Which is why they decided to stop with the hiring and recruiting process, because they felt that keeping their current employees safe was paramount, and limiting the number of folks that could come in was a good way to do that. So lastly, the other thing we did was to bring in subject matter experts. We leaned heavily on SHRM Atlanta for this. We have what's called a regional development committee out here. It's a pilot program that SHRM Atlanta has where they're putting together regional businesses and offering programming specific to the region. So in Douglas County, we pilot the West Metro Regional Development Committee, and through that partnership, we were able to get HR experts out here to talk to our HR directors, who have now been charged with the task of revamping their standard operating procedures, teleworking, how to make sure that their hiring procedures are equitable, understanding that maybe doing a virtual face-to-face type interview may not be equitable because some folks may not have access to that kind of thing, but doing a phone interview is more equitable, but just going through all of those different scenarios. And so that has been a great help to our employers, they said, just because this is such uncharted territory that no amount of experience they have prepared them for what they are experiencing right now. And so being able to lean on one organization and have that organization do the grunt work to assist them has been invaluable to them. So with that, I'm going to stop and turn it back over to Dana for the next part of the agenda.
Excuse me. Thank you to both Jackie and Breezy for sharing your presentation. We are going to go into the question and answer period. Let me share my screen. So thank you to both Jackie and to Breezy for sharing the information with us. We heard a lot of good information from both sides on from Jackie related to which industries are still hiring and how those industries are adapting. And we heard from Breezy about how she and her department are supporting employers from their perspective. So I have a couple of questions that we've prepared, but we're also going to engage the audience. So if you all have questions for Jackie or Breezy, please put those in the chat box and we'll respond to those as best that we can. We would like this to be a conversation, so definitely encourage you all to ask questions and to get engaged. I will start off with our first question, and then we'll hopefully get some audience participation. The first question is for Jackie in relation to the industries. So you mentioned healthcare, IT, and supply chain as being industries that are still hiring. Are there industries that you've seen that are not going to be able to rebound, or industries that hiring may not pick back up to the levels that they were prior to the pandemic? And if so, what are those industries so that we can be aware of those?
Yeah, that's a really good question. From what we've heard, retail is something that I think is going to be fundamentally changed. One of the things that we've heard is that some brick and mortar stores that have furloughed or laid off a lot of people or had multiple stores, they're choosing to only reopen a portion of those stores regardless. And so I think that and the increase in online ordering is going to change that industry a lot. What we've also heard is that the real estate industry is changing. So as so many of our businesses are going virtual and they're planning to stay more virtual than they were before, you don't need as much of a footprint in like a corporate office. I think it was Facebook that said, regardless, everybody's going to be working virtual. So they're not going to need like an actual space for their employees to be. So that industry is also definitely going to completely change because of how everybody's starting to work more virtually.
Thank you. And are there any industries that you see emerging that may not have been as prevalent before, but that you're now starting to see them hiring or anticipate them hiring that were not hiring before?
Yeah, I would say that manufacturing companies, because they've had to, a lot of them have shifted if they're able to, like a lot of like alcohol distributors we've seen, they are shifting their manufacturing process to be able to make hand sanitizer, and some manufacturing companies were shifting to make masks for people. So I think manufacturing is definitely, you know, all a mixed bag. Some manufacturing companies are going to do better. Some were able to make that shift. So I definitely think manufacturing is one to keep your eye on. And then within healthcare, we've seen this idea of contact tracing as of occupation. And what they do is really kind of track the COVID-19 infection rates and kind of who have you been in contact, so that you know as a person if you've maybe been in contact with somebody. So that's a specific occupation that we're keeping our eye on that nobody talked about 3 months ago.
Great, thank you for that. And Breezy, you shared with us how you are, in your department, have been supporting employers, and you mentioned some very specific ways that you all have been engaging with them. One of the things that you mentioned was the PPE availability and how Douglas County was able to step up and support other employers. Have you heard from other regions that, or where employers are still having trouble accessing PPE? And if so, in addition to that, are you hearing that employers or how are employers reassuring their employees or potential employees that the workspace or the work is safe to come back to?
Yeah, so one thing we did was ensure that the governor's office and the Georgia Department of Economic Development had the contact information for our local folks who said they had the PPE available and could supply it throughout the state if needed. So ensuring that those folks who hopefully in other regions throughout the state would go to their regional project manager through Georgia Department of Economic Development, and then they would then reach out and get the information. So that's how we coordinated it through other regions and across the state. And I know a lot of other medical supply manufacturers and distributors did the exact same thing. So it wasn't just relying on our local folks. So that was good. And that was coordinated pretty early on. Around the end of March, we received an email from the governor's office and from the commissioner asking us to do that kind of thing. The other thing about how they're keeping them safe, I'm telling you, we have heard from employers doing a variety of things, from putting folks on teams to making the workday, for those 24/7 manufacturing firms, a lot of them do a 12 on 12 kind of schedule where the employees work 4 days on and 4 days off and work a 12-hour schedule. So they have, a lot of our manufacturers have shortened the actual workday so that there's an hour and a half to 2 hour break between the two shifts for the sanitizing and cleaning of everything before the next shift comes in. And also, so that's one way the manufacturers are. In our office space, a lot of them are doing teams where the same group of people are in the office at the exact same time. And then the others are working from home, so that if there is an issue, it's not the entire staff that's impacted. It's the one group. We have an architect firm that has about 30 folks, and they have put their people on 6 different teams. So they have teams of 5 that are in the office at any one time. And so that's one way employers are doing it to keep their folks safe. A number of ways that they're doing it, but all of them have taken, I would say, advanced sanitation and cleaning protocols. Because of that, very few are allowing, if they're in the office space and not, retail or customer facing employers, they're not allowing outside visitors. They're not allowing their employees to have outside meetings. No one I'm aware of has opened up business travel for their employees. So when we think about those industry sectors that will likely take a little more time to revamp, I wholeheartedly believe hospitality and the event space is going to take a little more time to rebound, simply because, until we can have more people gather, those type of functions won't happen. So, I see a question though. Any significant trends in the construction industry was just asked. And construction is something, we have a lot going on in Douglas, and that's one thing we did talk to our companies who are doing some physical expansions or building new spaces, whether it's spec buildings and those kind of things. And construction for us actually increased because they were able to do more because of closures. If the building is closed, they don't have to work around off hours. They were able to come in and work more heavily on the building itself if it was an expansion. For those who were just building new facilities, it was pretty much business as usual, according to the general contractors that we spoke with.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that. Go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I would add that that's very similar to what we heard from our construction companies as well, is that they haven't been really impacted, at least right now within the pandemic, that they've actually seen some of an increase, and that their projects are still very much on time and not many of them were impacted. I'll be interested though to see, as the economy is changing, if that trend continues, because if we continue to see a dip, if the this pandemic recession, if you will, kind of looks more like the Nike swoop, where it takes a little bit time to recover, then there's generally less money in the market for construction. So we'll just kind of have to keep our eye on it. But right now, I would agree with Breezy 100% that we haven't seen a huge impact on construction.
Okay. The one thing I will add to that too on the construction is what we did here, especially in the industrial space, is that companies are looking at having less office square footage. And so because they have realized over the past 10 weeks that employees can effectively and productively work from home, that they are decreasing the dedicated office space within those manufacturing and industrial spaces. So it's been a unique experience with the projects that we've been working, how they've sent back some revamped site plans on what their build outs might look like, and with the reduction of office space.
Thank you for that, for both of you. We had a couple of questions in the chat box. I wanted to make sure that we addressed. There was a question around what is the current unemployment rate in Georgia, if either one of you have that information. And then there was a question that, Breezy, you did answer in the chat box, but I think it would be good for everyone to hear it, just in relation to Jackie's point around employees choosing or electing not to return back to work because the UI benefits right now are higher than they would normally be. So someone was asking kind of to break that down or explain what that difference is and how it is affecting or impacting people returning back to work.
So the average weekly unemployment in Georgia is around 300. It maxes out at, I think, 335, but most folks do receive around a $300 weekly benefit. With the addition of the 600 flat rate weekly benefit from the federal government, that creates a $900 weekly benefit. And that's about a $22.50 average hourly wage, pre-benefit or pre-taxed. So we are hearing that from employers too, that the candidates coming in are saying, yeah, I want a job, but I don't want to start till after the unemployment runs out. And that's a unique, that's unique to this situation, I believe, because otherwise, you know, it's not, it typically at the $300 a week mark is not anywhere near what people need to survive or to have a livable wage. So.
That's helpful. And do either of you know what the current unemployment rate is?
12.5 is what they said on the news yesterday. But I don't know. They didn't, you know, the news, they didn't give a lot of details around what that encompassed. And I'm honestly not sure if it was the Metro Atlanta unemployment rate or if it was the state as a whole.
Okay, thank you. So we talked about how employers are pivoting to a lot of virtual, both on the hiring side, but also on the work side. How are employers, well, first question is around the virtual job fairs and the recruitment side. And are best practices emerging that we should be aware of? Are there platforms that you guys have seen that are working well? And then on the retention side, as employers are starting to reopen and also trying to engage their employers to come back, or the employees to come back from being furloughed or laid off, are there incentives that they are putting into place to overcome some of the things like the UI benefits, but also the fear of going back to work and being safe? What are you seeing on the virtual recruitment side, but also on the retention side in terms of additional incentives that employers are having to put in place?
Yeah, I can take the first part of that question about virtual fairs because we've been doing a lot of research and talking with a lot of partners about how would we pull off a virtual fair that is really impactful and beneficial both for our employers and our job seekers. So a slide that I didn't show you guys and I wish that I had now in retrospect is kind of how we're thinking that SHEP model will work out. So we know that job seekers they have various levels of digital literacy and various access to digital devices. And so the way that we are envisioning and have learned from our workforce partners that could be some best practices around virtual fairs is to have different avenues and different places that job seekers can plug into a virtual event. So if somebody has complete access to digital devices and the internet and is digital literate, then they can just access those from home. They might need some prep, right, from about, you know, how to do a virtual interview and, you know, making sure that their resume is good and how to, you know, best access this platform and get the most out of virtual events. But, you know, they're very plug and play. But there's also job seekers that we know that either they could maybe access it from a phone, but they maybe don't have great data like limits, like they don't have unlimited data, or maybe they're pressed on their data on their phone, or they don't have Wi-Fi at home, but they have a smartphone or a tablet that they could access the event from. We're envisioning Wi-Fi hotspots around the Metro Atlanta area that they could plug into the event using some assistance with accessing the internet. And the other group of job seekers that we know are out there are people that either aren't very digital literate, they need some kind of hand-holding accessing those events, or they don't have those digital devices. And so we imagine a social distance appropriate place to access those events at other community organizations where, you know, the computers are spaced 6 feet apart. After somebody leaves, you know, it gets wiped down and sanitized. There's like a couple facilitators. Everybody's got their PPE on so that those job seekers can still access that event, but they have support in order to do so. So based on all of our conversations with our providers, those are the best practices that we're starting to see emerge as it relates to virtual hiring events.
And I'll add in there from the employer side. So one of the things in the chamber economic development world that happened pretty early on was to try to transition as many of those in-person events to virtual. and that includes job fairs. And so before we decided to take that step, we did a survey with our employers, because, you know, while you want to continue as much programming as possible, you want it to be value added for all involved. And our employer said, look, we're not really hiring. There's no need for us to have a virtual job fair at this time. So that gave us the opportunity to learn from our friends and colleagues and other communities that were hosting virtual job fairs before we started to host ours. So we are planning one for middle of July, mainly because with that unemployment benefit going away, it will then prompt folks to look for new opportunities. And the way we've decided to do it, mainly because this is what we heard from the employers, is that their new way of work is completely different. They don't have time to go sit somewhere for 2 or 3 hours, even if it's virtual. And so we're going to do it where our employers are on, we're going to use GoToWebinar to allow for them to come on, talk about the jobs they have open, talk about their company, talk about the benefits, talking about their culture, and then have dedicated websites for those job seekers to go to apply for the open positions. We're going to record it. So if you are doing it live, when we do it, you will have the opportunity to use the chat function with the employers. But if by chance you can't do the live virtual one, it'll be a recorded session where you still get to hear from the various employers, and you get to have, but you get the website where those positions, those local positions are being posted. And then that way the employer knows that they found you through this virtual website or this virtual job fair. That gives us some analytics to see if it was worth our time and to give feedback to our employers. But it also opens it up to where if someone is working during the day, and maybe they're in retail or service and they really want to transition into a new career, but they don't get home till 11 o'clock at night, we're going to post this video a number of places for them to then go on and find these opportunities in our community. So we are hoping to keep ours at an hour, giving each employer 5 to 7 minutes to showcase themselves, but requesting that they stay on for that entire hour for any job seekers who want to use the chat function, but not extend it past that. So, and then provide the questions that were asked in chat to anyone who views it later, if it was, you know, good for the group type questions being asked. So that's kind of what we have found from a bunch of folks who did breakout sessions and did all those things. Our employers just simply said that's just too much for them right now, trying to figure out what this new HR world looks like.
Great. Thank you both for answering that question. I want to go back into the chat box. There was a question around childcare, and Breezy, you mentioned this in your presentation, that childcare is the #1 issue that employers and job seekers are facing. What have you seen or heard that is currently being done to offset this challenge? And are there things that are coming down the pike that you've heard about that would be helpful as well?
So I wish I had better information from a local community perspective. I am working from home right now because I don't have safe and reliable childcare for my 5-year-old daughter, who hopefully isn't burning my house down in the bottom where she is supposed to be watching a movie. This is what it looks like these days. Our executive director is in the same position. He has 2 children. His wife has a work from home job, and her job didn't change just because of this, because she's always worked from home. So her requirements are still the same. So he becomes the primary caregiver and trying to, you know, balance this. For our employers, you know, our churches were kind of the first folks to reach out and say, hey, we have these childcare facilities. Is there something we can do? But, you know, you want to make sure that there are safety guidelines in place, and then the restrictions around what a childcare facility has to do to keep the kids safe. You know, they can't transition classrooms. They have to be with the same teacher all day. They are limited class sizes. So even the childcare facilities that we've called within our community, and we've called all of them, if they are open, they're not taking on new clients. So if your kid wasn't already registered there, it's very unlikely that you can get in. If they're even open, my daughter's Montessori school has decided not to open for the summer. The Boys and Girls Club of Metro Atlanta decided not to open for the summer due to this. So those, you know, childcare facilities that are the go-to staples, a lot of them are opened. A lot of the weekly summer camps have closed. So with that, we have somewhat decided there's very little we can do at this point, just because it takes a significant amount of time, months, not significant, but several months to get a child care facility insured and registered and with decal and such. So we are now having the conversation with employers about, you know, since there's not a lot we can do now, but did you know there's a child care tax credit through Georgia for employers who provide child care services on site? So this has allowed us to have that conversation with our employers about these benefits that could come if they go that route. And the conversations have been positive. So we're hopeful that, you know, sometime within the next 12 months, we'll have employer-based childcare facilities. But right now, what we're having a conversation with employers is, you know, be a good employer to your employees. Understand that they are not going to be a productive employee if they're worried about where their child is and whether it's safe. And affordability has always been an issue. It doesn't go down. Now it's the lack of childcare and the lack of affordable childcare kind of compounding it. So I don't really have a good answer. I just know that all of mine have said that is the single most, if there was an employee that couldn't come to work, it was because they had nowhere for their child to go.
Great. So also in the chat box, someone mentioned, or we were talking about the unemployment rate, and someone did provide the exact, Lee Hunter, thank you for updating us on that. That is 12.7% for Metro Atlanta and 12.2% for Georgia. And then also clarified that the additional, insurance benefit is $365. So
yeah, it maxes out at that.
There was a question though around, is there a penalty for employees or job seekers who refuse to return back to work because of fear or COVID-19? Are they penalized for not returning back to work if there is work available?
I'm actually going to defer to Lee on that. So maybe she could answer it in the chat box as she's my regional Department of Labor rep. Trust her guidance because I know there are and there aren't. I think it's situational in some cases, depending on why they are refusing to return to work.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Lee.
Hi. There are, of course, a lot of different reasons that people may not be returning to work, and it kind of depends. If someone is not returning due to COVID reasons, someone is taking care of an elderly person that might have COVID or doesn't have, much like childcare, there's not elderly care, might have that issue, childcare, etc. Those are allowable. General fear, you know, it's got to be something that is specific and has to be adjudicated through the process. But I will say that if employers are talking to job seekers and offering them jobs and the candidate is refusing the job, then the employer can report that candidate through our fraud link on our website, because we really have to have people that, you know, if they're offered a viable job, they need to take that job. So we're encouraging people to please do that, to continue our process so that it can be legitimate for job seekers and employers alike. Does that make sense?
It does, and thank you for hopping on and sharing that with us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
We had another question, and this is probably more so to Jackie, because I think you mentioned this in your presentation in terms of how employers are, or how workforce providers can work closer with employers at this time. And one of the questions was around, do you see employers participating in more work experience or on-the-job training programs? And if so, how can workforce providers get engaged with them in that process?
Yeah, I think it'll depend on the employer. I know that a lot of the workforce agencies traditionally do a summer youth program where those youth are on a work experience or an internship. And I know that they're kind of shifting those models because of, you know, safety reasons for the youth. And I think that at least in the immediate in the summer, I don't think based on what we've heard from employers with the pause in just hiring people, and not wanting to increase exposure to their current employees, I think that that part may pause a little bit, but I think as things begin to recover and employers are looking for quality employees, I think that they'll definitely be interested in taking advantage of the workforce, agencies, business services, and the services that providers can offer.
Are there other ways that, I know you mentioned a couple of ways that workforce providers and employers have been working together, other ways that workforce providers can step up and support employers in this way. Are you seeing any, and you mentioned EAP as an employee assistance programs that are kind of stepping up and being more utilized. Are there ways that employers and workforce providers or social service providers can come together to partner in meeting some of the needs of employees that are being presented to employers that they may not have had to deal with before, whether that be food insecurity or clothing or access to childcare? We've already mentioned. Maybe it's transportation because, MARTA's schedules are different than they used to be and people are having trouble getting to work. Are there other ways that employers and workforce providers can work together to meet some of the needs that employees are seeking assistance with through the EAP programs?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Breezy, I think though you might have a really good perspective on if you've helped any of your employees with and providing any of those services.
Yeah, so so one of the hats I wear is I'm our local board chair for our United Way advisory group in Douglas County. And so very early on, I started working with the United Way folks as they put together that COVID relief fund to disseminate funds into local communities through the nonprofit sector, putting together, a very comprehensive list of resources that were specific to employers helping their employees navigate some of this. And so we used that list and shared that our food shelter, our food insecure nonprofits and our shelter. I don't know if this is thankfully or not, but we typically have a lot of families that face evictions in Douglas County, just, through rent and that kind of thing. And I think with the closure of the courts, it put a pause on the homeless part of our program, and the families sleeping in their cars, they were able to stay within their shelter and not be evicted. And that was helpful because food insecurity rose with children not being in school and with families being laid off and with restaurants closing and all of those things. And so we were able to help our employers. We provided that list with the employers who then were able to provide it to the employees. We created a website, Douglas Strong, on our chamber website and on our website that we just led employers to, and said, give this to your employees, just tell them to go to this website, because we were updating that continuously with different resources. We worked with some of our larger companies to provide grant funding to our food pantries so that since they had an increased demand, their supply might not have been increased due to funding. And so we wanted to make sure that they had the necessary funding in order to provide for the families within our community. And so those are some of the ways we kind of worked behind the scenes to assist our nonprofits so that our employers could then provide that information to the employees. The one thing I will say is that our employers seem to really care about their employees as human beings and not necessarily as employees at that time. And so they were asking, do you have a flyer? Is there, Douglas County just got public transportation and it did not decrease. The hours were already pretty confined, so they didn't shorten them, because if you shortened them anymore, they would be non-existent. And so with that, we were able to provide Douglas Connect cards and those kind of things to those employees who needed that benefit that wouldn't have needed them beforehand.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left. I want to make sure that we get to some of these other questions in the chat box. There was a couple of questions around youth specifically, and how agencies, employers, and workforce providers are meeting the needs of young people as they're seeking employment now. Is there anything that you all want to add in terms of what you've seen or heard, things that are emerging as very successful in terms of engaging youth in job training programs or employment opportunities at this point?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. So one of the, as I mentioned earlier, Metro Atlanta Industry Partnerships, or MAIP, is a collaboration with Career Rise and WorkSource Metro Atlanta. And I know that many of the local workforce areas are planning to offer more virtual career exploration opportunities for their youth this summer versus doing that traditional go into a workplace. So I think there's going to be some really interesting and innovative things that come out of this experience, where either some of the training can be done virtually, or that that might become part of just normal programming that's available, whether it's they do it at home or they come in and they can do some of these modules at the Career Center. And then it's been in the news a lot. WorkSource DeKalb, in partnership with DeKalb County, is doing a really large virtual youth career exploration program this year, where they're serving, I think it's like 700 or 800 youth with this program, and they had, I think it was 7,000 or 8,000 youth apply. So the need is definitely there. How we can sort through all of that and make sure that that's quality programming for our young people, I think, is something that all providers are wrestling with.
Breezy, is there anything that you would like to share on the youth question? Okay.
No, most of our youth specific programs are connected to our schools, and since our schools are not in session, those have been suspended at the moment. I am replying to the question about the school districts and Wi-Fi access, just as an example of what we're doing in Douglas on the chat. So actually that, so I'm about to submit this answer.
Great. And I know that Metro Atlanta Chamber is also coordinating a large opportunity youth fair, job fair next week, I believe, or coming up pretty soon. So
yep, it's on June 10th.
June 10th, we can get that information out to the group as well. So it looks like we are at our time. It went so quickly. But I want to thank our panelists, both Breezy and Jackie, for joining us and providing information about how they are working with employers. I want to mention a couple of things that are coming up from MAX as well. On Monday, we have an event with Jodan Banker to talk about TCSG and what they are going to be doing related to the Emergency Dislocated Workers Grant funding that's available. So if you're interested in getting involved with that, that is on Monday from 11:30 to 1:30. So you can email us to get engaged or involved in that event if you would like to. We also have our next Max Minutes, which is scheduled for June 19th at 9 a.m. With Greg Wilson from the Carl Vinson Institute, and also talking about the fiscal impacts of COVID-19. So continuing that conversation as well. So I invite you to get involved with MAX and continue to support our events. Again, want to thank our anchors, supporters, and sponsors. Thank you again to our panelists for being here today, and thank you all for joining us. We will send out the slides as well as the recording for today's presentation. Thank you.